Well, I'm Russ Jaffe, an internist, physician, clinical pathologist, biochemist, certified clinical nutritionist. I maintain fellows medical status as a clinical pathologist, a clinical nutritionist in the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. I'm a scientific fellow. I'm a member of the Federation of Clinical Immunology Societies, and I'm a fellow of the American Medical Laboratory Immunologists and an overseas fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine. I'm also a research fellow at the Health Studies Collegium and director and founder of Perk Integrative Health and of ELISA Act Biotechnologies. So our topic is methylation. And first, maybe some definition to help us understand what the term itself means. Methylation is part of the grammar of biology. It's part of the language. It's part of how we translate and transport and transfer things in the body. So methylation is about the transfer of methyl groups. Methyl groups means CH3. That means one carbon groups. One carbon transfers change the solubility. The more methyl groups, the more soluble and easily moved and transported. The less methyl groups, the less soluble, the less easily moved and transported. So when we methylate more, we make things more transportable. Up to a point, that's good. But hypermethylation, where you're transporting too much because what you're transporting isn't very high quality, that's a problem. And too little methylation, where you're not able to renew and transport, that's a problem. In the middle is the balance where methylation works properly. And now let's look at the methyl donors, the ones that give. Let's look at the methyl acceptors, the ones that take. And let's look at the methyl carriers, the ones that modulate the process. Now, methyl donors include methionine. MET is the abbreviation for the amino acid methionine. Methionine is a sulfur-containing amino acid and an important one, as we'll learn, in terms of both methylation and detoxification. And in addition to methionine, there is SAM, S-adenosyl methionine, and SAM, which comes from methionine after it's adenosylated. As it's S, the sulfur is adenosylated in methionine, S-adenosyl methionine. And then there's TMG, trimethylglycine or betaine. Betaine hydrochloride or trimethylglycine is another source of methyl groups, a source of methyl substrates, whereas methionine and SAM are involved in the cyclic transfer. Now, in addition to the donors that give, there are the acceptors that take. Now, who takes? DNA and RNA and proteins and toxic residues to make them more water soluble to get them out of the body. So there are lots of transmethylation reactions, lots and lots and lots. And who modulates or controls this biological language, this grammar of biology, these transfer of these methyl groups? It's modulated by B-complex vitamins, folates as part of the B-complex, but also the mineral magnesium and ascorbate, commonly known as vitamin C, but actually here a substrate to set the redox potential, ascorbate. Okay, so we've got the donors that give, we've got the acceptors that take, we've got the modulated carriers. Let's get into the particulars. Well, in terms of the methyl carriers that modulate, vitamin B6 is helpful, and giving supplemental B6 can be helpful, and sometimes people need what seems like a lot, 100 milligrams, 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams of B6 has been used safely in cases where people have resistance to its effects. Vitamin B6 needs magnesium and ascorbate to work properly. It needs the buffering mineral magnesium to activate the same enzymes that the B6 helps. The B6 activates, but so does the magnesium. Magnesium allosterically, magnesium changes the shape favorably so that the B6 works better. And ascorbate sets the general redox potential so that the catalysts are efficient, the enzymes are effective. So B6 is important, but it needs magnesium and ascorbate, And you'll find that people who need a lot of B6 are the ones who often need more magnesium and ascorbate. And when they get enough of the magnesium and ascorbate, they won't need so much B6. Now the next is vitamin B12. The hydroxycobalamin is the natural form. That's what we prefer. It has a nice long, meaningful half-life that's measurable in about 12 to 18 hours. In contrast to methylcobalamin, which is popular, it has a very short half-life measurable in minutes. And I prefer to use the hydroxycobalamin form, the natural form, that the body locally converts easily to methylcobalamin where it's needed and is used where it's needed. That's what I recommend. So vitamin B12 is important. The hydroxycobalamin is the preferred form. The cyano form, which is the most common supplemental form, if you're only giving a microgram or two a day, then the cyanide from the cyanocobalamin is not such a big problem. But where you're giving 1,000 or 2,000 micrograms a day, I don't think the cyano form is an appropriate form. And I think the physiologic form, the hydroxycobalamin, is preferred over the methylcobalamin, however popular the methyl is right now. And just to address that specific question for a moment, methylcobalamin is a very powerful methylating agent. The body makes it and uses it locally, and I think that's smart. So methylcobalamin is able to do things and methylate things that hydroxycobalamin cannot. For example, methylcobalamin can take metallic mercury and turn it into methyl mercury. Oh dear. Methyl mercury is 1,000 to 10,000 times more toxic than metallic mercury. So if you have some metallic mercury, I wouldn't expose it to methylcobalamin. I wouldn't convert it to methyl mercury. Hydroxycobalamin doesn't do that. I think that's why the body is smart to make hydroxycobalamin the surveillance form, the form that goes around and gets converted locally as needed to methyl. In a very short time, the methyl gets used up and the methylation takes place. Folate, natural folate. Again, there are multiple, about 8 different forms of folate. Not the synthetic folic acid, not the downstream form that you would use for chemotherapy salvage. But all forms of folate are important in keeping these cycles moving. And the takeaway is that methyl carriers modulate and adequate levels keep methyl donors cycling. You want to keep methylation in its mid-balance resilient point. You don't want too much, you don't want too little, you do want a bunch. You do want the methyl donors to be in balance and cycling. And now we know the specific ones that we might want to focus on and measure. Now let's take a few minutes to look at this slide in regard to the cycles. We start on the right where we see methyltransferase. And most anything in the body, X, represented by X, most anything in the body, a protein, a DNA, an RNA, anything, a xenotoxin, can have a methyl group added to it in the presence of the right enzyme. The methyltransferase enzyme has to be specific for whatever this is, but they're pretty broad in their repertoire. And what happens is SAM, S-adenosylmethionine, gets converted to S-adenosyl homocysteine, and the methyl group is transferred to the methyl compound. And the methyl compound, methyl X, is now more water soluble and can be moved around more easily, but could be more toxic, and you might want to get rid of it about as fast as you make it. Now let's go to the center cycle. We started with SAM, S-adenosylmethionine. We transferred the methyl group to make S-adenosyl homocysteine. And the body wants that adenosine for genetic purposes. So the body takes the adenosine and leaves homocysteine. Now, when you have enough folate to help with the methionine synthase, to activate the methionine synthase enzyme, when you have enough B12, you're able to convert homocysteine to methionine. And then with the help of ATP and energy, you can add adenosine from the ATP to make adenosyl methionine. Phosphate comes off, and so does ADP, not just PPI, but actually adenosine diphosphate comes out. So the adenosine, no, actually this is right. The adenosine triphosphate goes to PPI and PI, and the adenosine is transferred to the methionine, just like this chart says. So you want to keep this cycle going. It depends upon adequate folate, natural folates, all of the forms in B12, hydroxycobalamin preferred. But notice if homocysteine begins to build up because you don't have enough B12 or you don't have enough folate or enough B complex vitamins, if homocysteine begins to build up, there's a salvage where B6, along with magnesium ascorbate, when you combine B6 and magnesium ascorbate, you can activate enzymes that convert homocysteine to cystathionine, and then cysteine, the cysteine can be used by the body and salvaged. So you don't want to build up homocysteine. There's a lot of reasons why, and I'll talk about them, but you don't want to build up homocysteine. And the best way to bring homocysteine down is to have enough of the hydroxycobalamin B12, enough of the natural folates, enough of the B6, the pyridoxine or pyridoxal phosphate, and the magnesium ascorbate to get the magnesium and the ascorbate in adequate amounts. Now, what happens when you have methylation defects? When you have methylation deficits, there's a lot of steps, but the result is impaired elective protection. The body does a lot to protect you when it's energetic and healthy. It makes metallothioneins to trap toxic metals. It upregulates the cytochrome system to deal with xenotoxins. It increases the production of ATP to help detoxify through the methylation cycles. So when methylation deficits accumulate, they have profound consequences in impaired elective protection. The body begins to shut down to survive. Repair deficits accumulate as inflammation and the discomfort of that. Poor cancer surveillance and increased cancer risk. Low detoxification, less detoxification, more buildup of xenotoxins in the body, more retention of the bad stuff instead of getting the bad stuff out. And low cell energy. When the ATP to ADP ratio goes below 100, cells begin to poop out. They don't have enough potential to make things happen, and they go into a survival mode. When methylation defects are present, your efficiency can be 10% rather than 100%. And in essence, your get up and go, got up and went, and you're not sure where it went to. And what are the clinical results of a high homocysteine? We're most aware of the heart, blood vessel, and brain health issues. So cardiovascular disease goes up, peripheral vascular disease goes up, coronary artery disease goes up, arteriosclerotic heart disease goes up, and stroke goes up. Vascular dementia increases the risk of going senile, particularly Alzheimer's senility. All prion-related neurodegenerative diseases go up when homocysteine is up. And in regard to bone health, density of the bones is related to homocysteine. When homocysteine is up, you're not making as much new bone, you're not recycling and remodeling the old bone that needs to be repaired. And if you want to increase bone blood flow, which is a good thing to do, a high homocysteine works against you. A low homocysteine is your friend. More things that a high homocysteine does to you. In addition, this aberrant DNA methylation increases cardiovascular disease risks of all kinds and stripes and flavors, cancer of all kinds, chronic fatigue syndrome, CFIDS, chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, fibromyalgia, the untreatable muscle pain, PMS hormone dysregulations, male menopause, and as I said, your get up and go just got up and went and you're not sure where it went. These are often signs of high homocysteine. And we'll talk about what to do with that after we look at where it's coming. Homocysteine levels are rising. Laboratories are extending their ranges, but that's because there's more unhealthy people. And if we look at it from a cardiovascular epigenetic standpoint, 92% of our health is epigenetic. 92% is the choice we make about habits of daily living, about what we eat and drink, think, and do. So these 92% choices influence cardiovascular risk factors. There are biomarkers, which we'll talk about. And the environment then influences the expression of the genome. The epigenome is the modulated influence of the environment on the genome. So the genome from above, if you will, and the environment from below come together to make the epigenome. And this can increase your risk of subclinical disease. It can go on to cardiovascular disease, or it can strengthen you if it's done properly. Currently, the environment does tend to produce subclinical disease and then cardiovascular and other maladies, and we'll talk a bit about how to manage in these stressful and intoxicated times. Well, let's look at some of the data. Homocysteine levels predict survival in coronary heart disease. Here you have the proportion of people who lived 5 years at different levels of homocysteine. And let's look at the bottom to begin with. If you had more than 20 micromoles per liter, you had a more than 1 in 4 chance of dying in 5 years. In fact, in 4 years. The next line up is 15 to 20, and now you had about a 1 in 4 chance of dying. And the 9 to 15 is showing a steep drop out at about 5-6 years. Less than 9 years, you have a 1 in 20 chance of dying. Well, is that as good as it gets? No, it turns out there's another level that the data can be stratified for, and we've done this. And if you have less than 6, at 5 years, you have about a 1 in 100 or less chance of dying of a cardiovascular event. So cardiovascular diseases used to be very rare. This was in the 1920s and 30s. Then they became very common in the 50s and 60s. And they've actually been tapering off, partly because people are they're smoking less and doing less harmful things to themselves and doing other things that may not be so good, like being more sedentary. So we still have too much cardiovascular disease, but it is a choice. And it's a choice largely related to calorie management, metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, diabetes, and its cardiovascular and systemic complications. So if you have less than 6 micromoles of homocysteine versus more than 20, there's a 16-fold difference. That's a 16,000% difference if you like percents, but a 16-fold difference, that's a big difference. So I recommend a homocysteine of less than 6 rather than one of greater than 20. Too many people have higher homocysteines, and we do know largely how to get the homocysteine down to less than 6 by providing the full complement of what's needed, what I indicated before and will reiterate. But let's look at another cut of that data. The difference in 5-year mortality at different homocysteine levels done by a different group. Less than 6.5 had very low, going progressively higher to more than 15 that had near 1,000% more. That's a 10-fold or more difference in the way in which that group was stratified. And look on the right, difference in senility risk. Low has a low senility risk, more than double at the greater than 15 level, according to this clinical report. And when we've surveyed the literature, we realize that people are in need of more methylation factors, more quality B6, quality B12, and folates. We put this together in PERC Vessel Health Guard. PERC Vessel Health Guard is designed to be dissolved under the tongue before swallowing and is a superior way of getting active B6, active B12, and folates into the body, especially in people who have digestive issues that block the uptake of the nutrients from the small intestine. Here's an interesting study. This is on methylation and autism, and one of the most predictive measures of all the things that they measured. And notice they measured tryptophan and glutamate and isoleucine amino acid and phenylalanine amino acid and serine and tyrosine and beta amino isobutyrate. And that was interesting. That has to do with fat metabolism. But homocysteine was way up. It was actually increased more than any other risk factor in this group of autistic children. So we recommend a Vessel Health Guard to bring down the homocysteine wherever it's elevated, including in children with autism spectrum disorder, where vitamin deficits are the rule, where oxidative stress is playing a role in the condition, and where less energy for transport, sulfation, and detoxification can impair neurodevelopment and learning. Now, with regard to DNA methylation in the immune system, there is a chart that we've borrowed and would like to explain, but the bottom line and the takeaway is healthy methylation improves immune tolerance. And if you look at the immune system, it's got several arrows pointing to it, one of which is genetic predisposition, one of which is environment. You notice that the immune system interacts with local activation, that is the environment, and the epigenetic influences on the environment. So the environment influences directly and indirectly the immune system. And if there's too much activation, then you can have loss of tolerance. And there are other ways of losing and breaking tolerance. But when you lose tolerance, you have a risk of autoimmunity and tissue damage. We think that that is a problem that can be addressed, and that LRA by ELISA test is the way to address it. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, predictive biomarker tests with healthy goal values. These are the important tests to know at what risk you are for quality of life and for longevity. Homocysteine, we recommend less than 6 micromoles per liter for methylation and detoxification. CRP, and it should be the high sensitivity HSCRP, should be less than 0.5 milligrams per deciliter for repair, deficit correction, and inflammation management. Hemoglobin A1C should be less than 6 milligrams per deciliter for sugar, insulin, and cell energy. Oxidative stress and antioxidant sufficiency means that your oxidized, directly measured oxidized LDL and 8-oxoguanine should be as low as possible. Absent would be good. Vitamin D, 25-hydroxy-D should be 50 to 80. And the first morning urine pH should be 6.5 to 7.5 to deal with adequate buffering minerals and metabolic acidosis. And then we recommend LRA by ELISA tests, delayed allergy functional tests, and treatment plans, not just because we developed the procedure, but because after many years of using it in outcome studies and hearing from clinicians case by case, we're very confident that if you want to improve these biomarkers above, having an optimized immune response mechanism is part of that process, and LRA by ELISA comprehensive tests and treatment plans are part of the solution. Well, let's briefly review healthy immune methylation responses. When you have healthy immune methylation responses, there are no allergies and the immune system is tolerant. When you have healthy immune methylation responses, the immune system can neutralize infections and allergens when they come in, and there are no seasonal allergies, there are no allergies. Healthy immune methylation responses means that we can repair from daily wear and tear damage. The repair system is working at least half the day. It can also surveil and identify for deletion abnormal cells, cancer cells that form. And everybody makes cancer cells every day. Unfortunately, most of us have a competent anti-cancer mechanism. I want to keep mine for my full lifetime. So healthy immune methylation responses mean that white blood cells can recycle pathogens. In fact, anything that's foreign gets put into a lysosomal recycling center, broken down to its building blocks, and made beneficially into whatever the body needs those building blocks to do. An overloaded immune system, on the other hand, means overconsumption of antioxidants and B complex. So antioxidants and B complex get consumed faster. You need more protective antioxidants and more B complex, more ascorbate and other antioxidants, more B1, B2, B3, B6, B12, folate, GABA, inositol. There are lots of nutrients that aren't true vitamins, like ascorbate that we still call a vitamin, and some that we've taken out of the list, but were originally identified when we were looking for essential nutrients. An overloaded immune system potentiates chronic illness. It enhances and calls for inflammation, which is really repair deficits when you look at it physiologically. It increases digestive remnants, which can be an immune burden on the body, especially if the body is more permeable, if you have leaky gut syndrome. And an overloaded immune system means there will be chronic degenerative autoimmune illness. And if you have one autoimmune illness, look further, you're likely to have more chronic degenerative autoimmune illnesses overlap with each other. They take away quality of life. They shorten lives, but more importantly, they shorten quality of life. And in most cases, we can, in 6 months, rehabilitate the immune, neurohormonal, digestive detoxification systems and do that systematically. And so what we want to do is restore immune tolerance so that the antioxidants and B complex can be saved. Less of them go farther. We don't need to take as much to get the benefits. We want to restore immune tolerance so that we can be resilient and stress resistant. We want to restore immune tolerance so that we can repair and be active in our cancer surveillance mechanisms. We want to restore immune tolerance to digestive capabilities, and we want to restore immune tolerance for youthful longevity. I want to be as youthful as possible, as long as possible. Please join me. The immune system. If we want to enhance and stop the burden, well, Allergens that provoke symptoms when present in excess overload foreign reactive antigens. Repair is deferred, defense does come first. Chronic infection when immune tolerance is lost, as I said, to review that. And only functional lymphocyte response assays, LRA, only functional cell response assays can identify the causes of immune overload. Here, go by clinical results, go by the published results, go by the anecdotes. Look at the laboratory tests with me briefly. Type 1, of course, are the more common, the raster skin tests, the usual kinds of things that most conventional allergists do. But then there are delayed allergies, and here lymphocyte response assays uniquely tells good from bad. LRA by ELISA ACT is the evidence-based results that we recommend. There are tests of just antibodies, but these can be confusing and misleading, as can be the tests of particle size rather than true cell culture. So on the right, you see that there are different flavors to allergy. The white slice is the type 1 acute IgE common allergens, the ones that cause hives, wheezes, itching, and anaphylactic shock. Then we have to the right of that, going counterclockwise, type 2, which are antibodies, IgA, M, or G. They can be helpful or harmful. The LRA distinguishes good from bad antibodies, and that's one of its strengths, and it gets all of the antibodies, not just the IgG, and that's another of its strengths. And it measures immune complexes, and it measures direct T-cell responses where antibodies are not present. So an antibody test can't measure T-cell responses, only a cell culture can. And LRA by ELISA ACT is ex vivo, which means it's able to get you functional antibody and immune complex and T-cell responses concurrently and as they occur in the body ex vivo, the reactions in the laboratory happening just as they do in the body. So we recommend a physiology first approach, that the immune system be reset, renewed, repaired, and restored to tolerance. There's a comprehensive plan to lower the burden by substituting for the reactive items. This is a window of opportunity. This is not deprivation. This is substituting for a period of time so the body can forgive and forget and strengthen its own innate mechanisms. It's a comprehensive plan that's bioavailable, nutritional supplement driven. We do think that supplements in today's toxic and stressful world are essential. And the comprehensive plan is a lifelong health approach. The Alkaline Way is the name. The Alkaline Way is expressed through the joy of food, the Alkaline Way Guide. You see a picture of the current version on the left, and we'll be updating that as we have many times since we introduced it. The 18th edition was 2009, and I think we did introduce it around 1989 or 90. The Alkaline Way Diet includes foods that affect your body chemistry. You want the more alkaline ones that are on the left, not the more acid-forming ones that are on the right. This chart is easier to read in the book, the Alkaline Way Guide. It's also available to download as a PDF from the internet, and you can get it through the Health Studies Collegium, www.healthstudiescollegium.org. As you see on the bottom of the slides, www.healthstudiescollegium.org for more information and for more of the depth of science. So methylation resilience also has many steps, but it leads to robust elective protection. You're protected from toxic metals, you're protected from volatile organic chemicals, you're protected from much radiation because of the antioxidants, you're protected from persisting organic pollutants and hormone disruptors because the methylation makes them water soluble, and the detoxification gets rid of them. You're able to repair, so you feel youthful and resilient. You want to move more. Your cancer surveillance system is working to get rid of the bad cells. Your high energy cell ATP to ADP ratio makes for neuroimmunohormonal balance and detoxification and digestive competence, so that all aspects of your control systems are working for their best and for your betterment. So, to your health. Health is more than the absence of disease. Health is the fullest physical, mental, and spiritual expression attainable by each individual.